Good morning. This morning I read in the newspaper that only a few times in the history of the world has God manifested himself to earth in miracles, but that we no longer must expect any such manifestations of God, probably meaning that God is not the same yesterday, today, and forever, so we can change that passage in Scripture. But that isn't true. First of all, I want to call to your attention the fact that you are participating in a miracle. That this experience of being here this morning is itself a manifestation of God appearing as a miracle. And since this miracle is one of the very usual happenings in the message of the infinite way, I would like you to understand it thoroughly, to understand the principle which underlies it, and to expect that this same miracle will perform itself in your life daily as you understand the nature of the principle. To begin with, our visit to San Diego was primarily to meet our new grandchild, which was born here in April. And because Dr. Addington of the Church of Religious Science has always said, Joel, when you are in or around San Diego, please speak for us. There are so many of our students who read your books and would like to hear you. So that I wrote to Jack and immediately was invited to talk Sunday morning, yesterday. When I accepted the invitation, he said, if you could be here a few days more, we would like you to give us some additional talks. And since we were to be here until Wednesday, I accepted that. Now, when Mrs. Sortel of Glendora heard that I was to be in San Diego, she wrote and said that some of her students, of course herself, would welcome a class, even if it were just a 4-day session. And at first I said no, and then in the middle of the letter said, why, I'm told to say yes. And so I put a postscript on the letter saying yes. And so it was understood that there would be a little class here of about 20 or 22 students, and nobody else in the world would know about it. Now, as you know, our monthly letter did not publish anything about this class, and yet you find yourselves here this morning, some of you from Montana, the Carolinas, Florida, Arizona, all the way up and down this California coast to San Francisco and Texas, and where else I myself do not know. And you certainly must agree that this was done without taking human footsteps, without planning, without advertising, without desire on my part, and that this has all happened, if we may use that word, to me, and therefore to you. Now, has it happened as an accident? Do accidents of this sort take place for purposes of good? Or is there behind this class a divine instinct or guidance or plan? Is there a spiritual activity, an activity of intelligence and of love that has brought this class together in this manner, so unexpectedly? And of course, you know the answer. You know right well that if you are here, you were not brought here by anyone's human invitation or desire. You have been brought here by a divine guidance. This is the miracle, that we do not ever have to use human footsteps to accomplish the good in our lives. Now, let this not be misunderstood. This does not mean that you sit in a corner and wait for God to come there and push food down your throat. It means that as spiritual guidance comes to you, you act on it. In other words, without any desire for this class, without any thought that there would possibly be a class here, without any plans for it, without any advertising or even notification, here is this class. But once the direction comes, the human footsteps follow, and a room must be provided, and it must be a satisfactory room, and it must be one agreeable to those here. Then there must be the willingness to partake and the willingness to be the instrument through which God can work. As I was in my meditation early this morning on the subject of this class, that which unfolded was this: since you had nothing to do with it, since you did not bring it together, accept the fact that God has assembled this class, and God will feed this class, and you will merely be the trough. And so it will be, as you will find, that throughout this class I will be an instrument through which God will fulfill the purpose for which you were brought here. Now, you were brought here by a divine instinct in order that God might fulfill itself in some way in you. And I am only that instrument through which God can function to fulfill itself. This is a principle. You yourself are nothing. And if you can remain sufficiently humble, in time you will realize to what full extent you are nothing. And then you will find that you are the instrument through which God can fulfill itself and its plans in your family life, in your business life, in your spiritual life, in your social life, because God functions at every level of consciousness. There is no such thing as a material activity or a spiritual activity once you have come to the understanding of living by God's grace. Even the preparation of your meals constitutes a spiritual activity just as material as giving a lesson in truth. Teaching, whether it is Sunday school, whether it is public school, whether it is college, a teacher is engaged in a spiritual activity as a truth teacher, because they are imparting not only knowledge taken from books, but actually, if they themselves do not have a teacher's consciousness, the student will gain nothing more from them than knowledge. And knowledge can sometimes be dangerous. You will come to see then that you are not to divide up the activities of your life and say that these are material and these are spiritual, but you are to see that your entire life is a showing forth of God's life, God mind, God's spirit, and then whatever is left in you or me of a personal, selfish, or sensual nature will gradually dissolve. It has happened in some lives that a spiritual death and a spiritual rebirth took place instantly or instantaneously, and an individual was never again the same. But this is not the experience of most people. In the lives of most people, the dropping away of the personal, the selfish, the material sense of life is a gradual process as spiritual impulse is attained, spiritual wisdom is attained. Now, with this in mind, remembering that you are here as a part of a miracle experience of God, you can be alert, keep your consciousness open, so that you may see what form this miracle of God is to take place in your life. In other words, how this miracle that brought you here is to manifest itself in your individual experience. Be assured of this: miracles will take place in your lives from now on. Not that they haven't before, but now you will more readily recognize them, and you will be more expectant of them. It is much like saying that when Jesus called the disciples to him and said, "Leave your nets," he was saying to them, "Stop this fishing for fish. I will make you fishers of men." And of course you know that the first thought in their minds must have been, how will I support my family? These nets constitute the means of supporting my family. Of course they had enough vision to follow him, and so all they could do from then on was to watch how the miracle of supporting their family would take place, how their lives would be guided and governed after that experience, since it was bound to be in some way entirely different than they had ever before thought about. So it is with us. In the earliest days of our metaphysical or spiritual studies, we expect that the activity of God will make our human ways better. We expect to attain better human health. We expect to attain more supply, by which we actually mean more dollars. And the miracle at first does seem to manifest in that way. People find better health. They find a greater sense of supply. They find a better sense of home or companionship. Sometimes one of these and sometimes all. But actually, that is not their demonstration. That is not their demonstration, and eventually, unless they realize this, they end up by losing their spiritual demonstration. For the spiritual life does not consist of more matter or better matter. It does not consist of more or better human circumstances. For the Master revealed, and this is proven in the infinite way, my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, does not consist of more or better matter. It does not consist of more or better companionship. It does not consist of more dollars. My kingdom is a spiritual kingdom in which you find fulfillment. Strangely enough, on the outer plane, this will appear as health, as abundant supply, as sufficiency. But do not be fooled. Do not think that that health or the supply is your demonstration. The demonstration is what caused the health or the supply. There is the secret of the message of the infinite way. If you look at your health or your dollars, because these are improving, and you think that this is your demonstration, you will lose the way. This is the result of your demonstration. The demonstration itself was the attainment of God realization. Now, first of all, I want you to look at this American flag on my right. In it, you recognize the stars and stripes as a symbol, as the flag that represents what we call the United States of America. But actually, the colors, red, white, and blue, the stars or the stripes, are meaningless as stars and stripes, as red, white, and blue, unless you can see what lies behind that flag. Now, to understand this flag, you have to be able to go back to the days before the Revolutionary War and learn that the Masonic bodies which functioned in New England and Virginia were dedicated to freedom, equality, brotherly love, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. This was a fraternal organization sent here actually from England for the express purpose of founding on a new continent the teaching or theory of the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, equality, freedom, justice, and all of the moral lessons which are now as then included in the degree work of Freemasonry. Then you would have to know that the Revolutionary War was fought primarily by the Masonic body in the United States, that it had this experience of the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was not an activity of the citizens as such of Boston. It was an activity of a Masonic lodge that was meeting in Boston on that night, and that declared itself from Masonic work to a period of refreshment in order to go down and stage the Boston Tea Party. Then you must understand that it was the Masons of New England and of Virginia who met and organized, really, the Revolutionary War. They supported it, they financed it, they made its speeches, and we are told that no man could ever rise in George Washington's army above the rank of major unless he were a Master Mason, for George Washington would entrust nobody but those whom he knew to be dedicated to these principles. Now, when you understand this, that the American flag is not merely red, white, and blue, not merely stars and stripes. Oh no, that is merely what it represents to human eyesight. Every time you look at an American flag, you must remember that this flag is dedicated to the principles of freedom, equality, justice, the fatherhood of God, and the brotherhood of man. That is what this flag represents. When you understand that, then, you will understand that it is not a localized flag of the United States of America, but that its principles are meant to govern the world. Not the flag, not its government, not its president, not its Congress, but its principles. And therefore, you will never in your own mind localize this flag. You will see it as a dedication to these qualities, and then you will understand that these qualities must eventually become universal. Now, why is that important to us as students of spiritual truth? For this reason. When you look at man or woman, you are not really seeing what's there. You are seeing only a body, a corporeality. And it may be white or black, it may be Jew or Gentile, it may be bond or free, in its appearance to your eyesight. But it isn't that. Every individual on the face of the globe is a spiritual creation and offspring of God. And once you begin to perceive this, you will know that you can never rest until these qualities, freedom, justice, mercy, benevolence, fatherhood of God, brotherhood of man, you will never rest until you behold every individual on this earth showing forth those qualities, entitled to those liberties, to that freedom. This is the importance of a spiritual teaching, that it cannot be localized. There is no such thing as being spiritual in New York and not in California. There is no such thing as being spiritual in the United States and not in Africa. There is no such thing as being spiritual in the Occident but not in the Orient. Spiritual being is universal, and it is the true state of every man, woman, and child who has ever appeared on earth or who ever will appear on earth. And only when this recognition takes place within you and me does it begin to manifest throughout the world. The entire idea of liberty and freedom in human affairs had its origin in Greece. The Greeks were the first people on earth to know, to understand, and to live the free life. Theirs is the original concept of freedom on earth, and it is their concept which has spread around the globe. But their own freedom died. Later, we have witnessed the attempts at freedom as they came to France, as they came to England through the Magna Carta, as they came to France through the Revolution, then as they came to these shores through the Revolution, and South America through revolutions. And we have seen in the last 200 years how the idea of freedom, democracy, has spread, has encircled the consciousness of mankind, so that there is no place on the face of the globe where men are not either openly or secretly dwelling upon the ideas of freedom. Many, many years ago, when I came back from Africa from my first trip out on this particular mission, I said to classes, you are going to witness tremendous upsets in Africa. You're not reading about them in the newspapers now, but you will within a few years, because these African citizens are filled with the idea of freedom and justice, and it's going to erupt. And it has. England has since then given political freedom to many, many, many countries that were under its control, and others are going to be taken by force, as some already have, because the idea of liberty and freedom, justice and equality, is now so built into human consciousness that never again can slavery endure. And that is why when you read this news from Russia and the satellite countries, you need not be concerned. True, there may be some periods of bloodshed, there may be some wars, but all freedom has been won at that price, humanly, and therefore it may be that there will still be the need for bloodshed in the human scene, but above all things, have no fear and have no concern. As you have just witnessed on Vice President Nixon's tour, the Russians want freedom as much as we do. The Poles want freedom as much as we do, and they will not be denied. So that we have cause for rejoicing that the spiritual impulse is now so deeply ingrained in human consciousness that complete freedom, universal freedom, is only as far away as the next experience may carry it, and the only ones who can hurry the day and perhaps lessen the bloodshed are spiritual students. In the human course of events, this freedom will eventually come regardless of us, because it's already a part of consciousness. But our work can lessen the bloodshed or even prevent it, and our work can hasten the day. And that is one of the reasons we are here in this class. It is going to be made clear to you before this class is over what work the Infinite Way activity is taking in many parts of the globe and some of the fruitage of it. Now, before we get into that, I will have to start with the subject of meditation. You who are part of this class all come from metaphysical backgrounds of one teaching or another. Some of you have come through Christian Science, through Unity, through New Thought, through the Absolute, Divine Science probably, and it may be that your idea of the Infinite Way is that this is another of those teachings, and that those teachings and this can be combined. And right from the start, I want you to know that that is not true. Now, I am not going to talk about right or wrong. I'm going to talk about individual expression. In the beginning of the metaphysical movement, we have as the first organized activity the Christian Science movement. Now, there's no doubt that Mrs. Eddy was influenced in her metaphysical approach by her acquaintanceship and work with Mr. P.P. Quimby. But when she started her Christian Science work, undoubtedly there were many principles which she taught which came to her through Quimby and through her association with him. This fact is evident in her writings. As she continued her work of healing and teaching and organizing, a whole new concept of life opened up to her, and it was this that she called divine science. And in her writings she makes a difference between Christian Science and divine science. And so if you were to do what I did 30 years ago, spend about a year in concordance work on Mrs. Eddy's writings, you would learn that there are two sciences in her writings. There is a mental science and a spiritual science. The mental science you will recognize by the fact that it says, ignorance, sin, and fear are the procuring cause and foundation of all disease. That's in her book, Science and Health. Her spiritual science, you will find when you read in that same book, neither sin, disease, nor fear has the power to cause disease or relapse. Or when you read in her writings, mortal mind causes disease and immortal mind cures it. And then you find in those writings that neither sin nor fear can bring on disease or bring back disease, since in reality there is no disease. So it can't have a cause. In other words, then, you would find, it's there, two distinct approaches to the metaphysical life. One is the one in which you uncover error in the patient's thought, and the other is in which there is no error in the patient's thought, because there is only one mind, and that's the divine mind. Now, when you are studying Christian Science, if you had the wisdom to discern this, you would decide for yourself which approach to life was yours. And if you were of the mental type, you would be wise in sticking to the mental approach. And if you were of a spiritual nature, you would forget every statement in those books on that subject, and you would turn to the spiritual approach. Now, since I was a Christian Science practitioner for many years, and since I had been in healing work long before I knew anything of the principles of Christian Science, I at first knew nothing about these principles or what they were, and only after I was in the practice and did this concordance work did I discover these two principles. And naturally, my nature being the spiritual one, I never permitted myself to spend a moment on any of those mental statements of mental cause and physical effect or anything of that nature. And those of you who have my book, The Letters, which incidentally were the letters that I sent out to my patients during the years of my Christian Science practice, you will notice that every reference in the Bible, of the Bible, or Mrs. Eddy's writings has to do only with the spiritual approach and never once goes into the subject of mind. Now, as the years unfolded, my healing work continued. It was clear to me that I could have no part in anything that partook of a mental practice. Again, remember, not that it's wrong, it's very right for those who are at the mental level of consciousness. But it could be no part of my work. But when you are in the healing work, and as happened to me, work came to me, healing work from all over the globe, until in my last years I was taking care of 135 patients a day, 7 days a week. You will find that you are living so completely in a spiritual consciousness that you are continuously under instruction. And it was then that principles began to reveal themselves to me which I could find only few traces of in the literature of the world. Meanwhile, I began the reading of the religious, the metaphysical, the spiritual, and the mystical writings of the world, searching for confirmation of these things that were coming through, because some of them were dramatic, some of them were radical, some of them were frightening. For instance, sitting at my desk one day, the voice, in a loud voice, said, "Mind is not God." And you can be assured that when you have been reading books for as many years as I was on the subject of mind as God, this is frightening. But as the days passed and this continued to reveal itself, I was shown the place that mind has in our lives. And then it was revealed, which is one of our major teachings, that mind is an avenue of awareness. It is not a power, and was never meant to be used as a power. It is an instrument through which we become aware of that which is, but we do not make it so. We do not create it. We become aware of it. Just as we do not make the sun to rise in the morning or to set at night, we do not make 2 times 2 4. We do not make roses grow on rose bushes. But with our mind, we become aware that these things are true, that these things exist. And then our mind becomes an instrument through which God, or our soul, can begin to instruct us, guide us, lead. It becomes a presence that goes before us to make the crooked places straight. The mind is merely the instrument for this presence, this activity. Then came really the great revelation. Where were these things coming from that were revealing themselves to me? There was no personality involved. There was no master. There was no Jesus. There was no Oriental guides. And yet the direction was coming through as clearly as if there were an individual teaching me. But at no time has there been a guidance from a person. Always it has been from the Spirit. But of course the question always comes when you don't know, where is this coming from and how? And so one day, again, the voice spoke within me and said, the secret lies in meditation. Now meditation at that time was a word very little used in the Occident. In Unity there was a little booklet on the subject of the silence, and that was its only writing on meditation. New Thought had nothing at all. Christian Science had nothing at all. Christian Science used the words mental work. And yet meditation poured itself through, and I had to seek the answer to meditation. This was a job of 8 months. And at the end of 8 months, I attained the first second of what we now call meditation. That is, a cessation of thought and a complete stillness, followed by merely a feeling of well-being, as if all's well with the world, but not for any particular reason. I had to continue the practice and the study of meditation, and very soon I learned that my entire human experience was changing. In other words, if I would meditate before leaving home in the morning, and in this meditation achieve what we call a click, that is, that feeling of well-being or release, that my entire day was lived as if by magic. Healings took place easily. Supply came in without any directed human effort. There seemed to be a greater sense of joy in my life and freedom in my human relationships with patience with family, with neighbors. And on days when I didn't attain that complete release, it was as if I were living the day again, and I'd have some good things, but I could make mistakes, and the harmony, the full harmony, wasn't there. And so I began a practice of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning so as to be sure that whether it took place in 10 minutes or 4 or 5 hours, that I would not leave home until I had realized that freedom. Later, I recognized that this release or freedom or click really is only an effect. What takes place is a conscious realization of God's presence, or a conscious experience of God's presence, and then this click merely is an effect to let me know that it's happened. It is as when we meet, if we shake hands, we know we're present before that, but the minute we shake hands, we have something more tangible. It is the same way with affection. We can be in love, but the moment there's a kiss, we know a little bit more definitely that love is there. In other words, the kiss is nothing of itself. It is just an outer expression of something that has already taken place within, but now we have a tangible evidence of it. It is like gratitude. We can all feel gratitude, but it's meaningless until we have expressed it. We may express it in words, we may express it in dollars, we may express it in service, but as long as gratitude is just a feeling within us, it is nothing. So it is with love, so it is with every form of prayer. Prayer is never complete until some form of expression has taken place on the outer plane. Now, we'll come to that all, remember, during this classwork. I'm merely opening this as an introduction to show you first that the infinite way must be considered by you, studied by you, as an individual teaching, presenting to you some things which do not appear in other religious teachings of any nature. Some do, because you remember that there are some principles which run throughout life. Actually, there's only one truth. It is the means of approach to the truth that differ. The truth after you reach the mountaintop is one, but you are not at the mountaintop as a student. You are not even at the mountaintop as a teacher. You are only at the mountaintop in your meditation when you come face to face with the realization of God. Then you're at the mountaintop where all truth is one. But until then, every approach to truth is different. Every approach to truth must be considered by itself. Now, in my first experiences with the infinite way, I was invited to give talks to unity groups and to New Thought groups, and for the most part, these proved to be very unsatisfactory. The reason was I was presenting the specific principles which have revealed themselves to me in my lifetime of study, devotion, and revelation and practice. And in presenting them, I was not thinking of the way you may be accepting them down there through your background. And the result was a conflict. I remember one night at the Institute of Religious Science in Los Angeles when I opened my talk. Mind you, I didn't do it on purpose. It was purely inspirational. But I opened my talk by saying the foundational stone of the infinite way is that thought is not power. And almost instantly. There were no atomic bombs then, I don't think, but there were loads of big cannon. And after the meeting, two ladies came up to me who were then taking the leadership course. And they said, oh, and they were angry, you said thought isn't power, and we have come all the way from New York to learn how to use thought as power. And so, after a few of those experiences, I realized that I was not doing the students justice by going to them and saying something radically different from what they were being taught, even though what I was teaching was truth from our standpoint. Nevertheless, what they were being taught was truth from their standpoint. And so, with the exception of a very few teachers, Jack Addington has been one of them, and there are a few in Unity, I no longer go into any metaphysical movements, and our infinite way work is conducted exclusively as infinite way work, like this here, not in connection with any metaphysical center or any metaphysical movement. And you can see the reason why. It is not my function. I wasn't given the mission on earth to proselyte. In fact, when in 1946 I experienced 2 full months of illumination, the final message given to me was, never seek a student. Your students will be directed to you. And that explains why we do not advertise, why we do not proselyte, why we do not go out into the world to introduce this to anyone. Those, you remember the experience of the Master. A woman comes to him begging and pleading that he heal her child, and he refuses. I am sent only to those of my own household. In the end, because of her much pleading, he gives in and does the healing work. Now, we do not refuse healing work. Anyone, anytime that writes to us for help is given the measure of help that we can give, without regard to what they may be studying or even if they have never heard of metaphysics. But when it comes to the teaching, we do not go out to seek students. We wait to be invited. So it is with our teachers, our practitioners, and any of you who may ever engage in any infinite way activity. Please remember, the function of this work is not to advertise, not to solicit, not to proselyte. Sit quietly in your own home and realize truth, and those who are ready for you or for your message will be led to you. And if they are not coming to you, accept them, that you are not yet ready for them. There is no such thing as an unused idea in the kingdom of God. And therefore, if God has implanted an idea in you, it is for use, and the world will be drawn to you. That is, as much of the world as you can care for. Now, let us start with our foundational work, and this is meditation. And I want to explain to you that as long as you follow the principles of the infinite way, you must not go to God for anything. You must not seek anything of God or from God. You must never permit your prayers or treatment to in any way carry the belief that God has something that God can give you or bestow upon you or perform for you, for you will miss the way in the infinite way. You must understand the nature of God first of all. God is the creative and the maintaining and sustaining principle of his creation, that is, of the spiritual creation. Now, God requires no prayers to maintain 2 times 2 is 4, to maintain the stars in their courses, the times and of the tides, the rising and setting of the sun. God requires that no man pray to make roses grow on rose bushes or peaches to grow on peach trees. All of these things are carried on by the principles which God has undoubtedly embodied within the infinite consciousness which is God. In the same way, you don't pray to God when you eat a meal that God digest it for you, because you expect that there is a process of assimilation that automatically takes place and was probably provided for in the beginning. You don't pray when you go to bed at night that you will wake up in the morning, or that you will find roses on your rose bushes and oranges on your orange trees. You do not pray when you get up in the morning that God bring evening about at a certain time. It is a part of your inner awareness, your knowledge, that this is God's function and that it is to be performed without any assistance from you, without even the need of prayers. Now, if you can agree that God is the creative, maintaining, and sustaining principle of God's own universe, and that God needs no instruction from man, God needs no enlightenment from man, no orders, no directions, then you must ask yourself, why is there so much sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, and slavery in the world? Why is it then that God is not maintaining the health and well-being of every individual? Why is it that God is not maintaining peace on earth? Why is it that there exists slavery in some countries? And certainly man's inhumanity to man is too well known to you to need repeating here. Now, I have told our students in many classes, what I give you is my experience. I am not theorizing in my classwork. I am not telling you anything that was repeated in books or that in any wise comes from theory, belief. The instruction that I give comes from 30 years of personal experience. The infinite way is only my personal and individual religious experience. It is for this reason that I tell you that it will benefit you only in proportion as you can accept it and practice it. It is not anything that I can inflict on anyone. I have not discovered a way to set the world free. I've not discovered a way to empty hospitals. I have discovered how I could attain my own spiritual freedom and thereby experience a wonderful degree of human health, harmony, wholeness, completeness, and abundance. This experience I impart to you. As a teaching, it will have no value to you. Yes, the mere fact that we are present in this room means that there will be a great deal of healing going on, not only physical, mental, moral, financial, to the degree of your acceptance, because I, if I be lifted up, can draw all men unto me. In the degree that I am spiritually lifted up, you are at least in some measure lifted up, and thereby benefit by my consciousness